Hello and welcome to this course on Alzheimer's disease. My name is David Barton and I'm very excited that you have decided to join me on this journey to learn more about one of the biggest causes of death in the world today, Alzheimer's disease. I've created this course to help you learn the basics of Alzheimer's disease, to help you gain some valuable insight into the seriousness of the disease, encourage you to set some goals for your health and old age, and to consider some of the factors you need to address to avoid Alzheimer's and enjoy your life as you get older. According to current statistics, almost half of all people watching this video will most likely suffer from Alzheimer's by the time they are 85. And if you are fortunate enough not to have the disease, then you will most likely be caring for someone who does. Personally, I think that this is probably one of the worst diseases because dying from it can be very slow and heartbreaking, gradually robbing an individual of their most precious memories, their personality, and their ability to reason and communicate. It robs them of their friends, family, and loved ones, and then eventually takes their lives as well. The progression of the disease also differs for everyone, as we are all wired differently, and are exposed to different environmental factors like diet and exercise levels throughout our lives. So the way Alzheimer's affects one person may be entirely different to the way it affects another. But there is also a positive side to this problem, because I believe that the prevention of Alzheimer's is to a large degree in your own hands. You have within you the power to either stall or prevent the disease. By developing your own preventative strategy, you can sustain a healthy life until the day you die. But I also believe that if you want to have the best chances of living a full life, with full mental and physical faculties intact, right into your golden years, then you need to start now. I'm not talking about starting way down the track sometime in the future when you're ready to retire. I'm talking about getting started today. It doesn't matter if you are a young adult or an older adult. Your starting age is actually irrelevant. To be blatantly clear, your best chances of prevention require you to start taking action today. I say this with the greatest amount of urgency and respect, because unbeknownst to you, the disease may already be active in your brain, slowly destroying neurons and damaging brain regions. It starts when you're young. And because the damage is small, it goes undetected, but eventually it reaches a tipping point, at which stage you then begin to notice that your memory is slipping. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me that you don't want to get to the tipping point. So to prevent that from happening, you need to take immediate action by developing a preventative health strategy, which you can sustain for the rest of your life. This appears to be the best defense we have right now against the disease, and many other diseases for that matter. There is no magic pill that you can swallow, and there may never ever be one either. Don't expect scientists, doctors, or pharmaceuticals to swoop in and save the day when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. Their powers are seriously muted in this case. You, my friend, are the only one who is holding all the cards. The hand you hold relates to the lifestyle choices you have active in your life today. The strength of your hand decides the success of your game. This course will hopefully get you going and choosing the right cards so that you can hold a winning hand. So what will you learn in this course? This is an introduction course on Alzheimer's. So each section is short and to the point, but it does go into enough detail. In the next section, we will cover topics like what Alzheimer's and dementia is, a brief history of Alzheimer's, possible causes of Alzheimer's, symptoms and the progression of the disease, the global prevalence and the economic cost, what are your chances of getting Alzheimer's, and why prevention is better than a cure. I've added quizzes at the end of each section. They'll help you to reinforce the material and help you to store it in your long-term memory. So once again, thank you for joining me, and I hope that you enjoy learning more about Alzheimer's in this course. But before I begin, let me briefly introduce myself. I live in the scenic city of Dunedin, New Zealand, and I am married and have 3 children, all girls. Among my other qualifications, I have a PhD in psychology from Otago University, and I have a particular interest in memory and in health psychology. Furthermore, I have one parent who suffers from a form of dementia. Strangely enough, my interest in Alzheimer's disease started when I was doing research on memory. I've always been interested in developing photographic memory and how some people are able to do extraordinary feats with theirs. So I learned a bunch of strategies, and one of them helped me to arbitrarily learn pi to 500 decimal places. It actually blew my mind how easy it was to recall such a large number with relative ease. In another video course, I explain my best strategy. Because memory strategies can help exercise your brain, some authors were recommending these exercises to help prevent Alzheimer's. The theory went that you can view your brain like a muscle, and as a muscle it can be exercised. Memory exercises can help you to build a stronger brain muscle, and one which is more resistant to decay. However, once I got started researching Alzheimer's, I soon realized that preventing Alzheimer's needed a much wider array of strategies to be successful. Memory exercises are only one factor, which you need to address. But there are several other factors too. I believe that our best chances of living into a ripe old age, fully cognizant and physically capable, is to develop a lifestyle which prioritizes factors like good nutrition, physical activity, social interactions, mental development, spiritual growth, and stress management. And the good news is that we now live in an age which makes this a very possible proposition for most people. We are so blessed today to have at our disposal so many good things which can radically improve our lives and help us enjoy a long, healthy life right into our golden years. Ironically though, with all of our modern blessings come a number of challenges too. For example, we have so much more food today compared to times gone past. The problem with this is that it has also produced hundreds of millions of obese and overweight individuals who are now developing conditions like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. These conditions themselves are killers if left unchecked. For many of these people, the blessing has turned into a curse. And then of course we have dementia and Alzheimer's. The irony of this too is that the massive number of people now affected by dementia is the result of another blessing we have today, which is longevity. Millions of people are living much longer today than ever before. So if we are all going to live longer, then we have a vested interest in learning about Alzheimer's and how, or if, we can prevent it. I imagine that like me, you also want to live a long life, with not just fullness of years, but also ensuring that those years are filled with enjoyment, vitality, and excitement. This might seem like a big ask for many people watching this video. Maybe you believe that old age is the exact opposite of how I described it. But I believe that the way you enter your golden years will come down to the goals you set for yourself today. The goals you set around your health, social connections, stress management, spirituality, and mental development will all determine the course of your life and the outcome later on as you age. I hope you can see that prevention of Alzheimer's requires a multifaceted approach. I'll discuss this a little bit more later near the end of this course. But for now, as we come to the end of this section, I would like you to take a moment and think about your goals for your old age. I've just a few questions for you to ponder, so after you've done that, I'll see you in the next section. Okay, so now as we start this section, let us begin with the basic history of Alzheimer's. In 1906, German psychiatrist and neuropathologist Aloysius Alzheimer, at a gathering of German psychiatrists, presented the first report on a 51-year-old female patient of his, Augusta D. She had presented with symptoms of memory loss, confusion, and psychosis. Her condition rapidly deteriorated until her death 4 years later. When Dr. Alzheimer examined a biopsy of her brain tissue using chemical stains under a microscope, he noticed the presence of an abnormal waxy protein we now call beta amyloid and twisted fibers known as tau tangles. Today these plaques and tangles are the two most important pathological features of Alzheimer's. However, the medical fraternity back then paid little regard to his findings and dismissed it as a rare condition, affecting only a few unfortunate middle-aged people with presenile dementia. More than 50 years passed until in the late 1960s, when neuropathologists started noticing the same amyloid plaques and tau tangles following autopsy of old senile brains. The shocking revelation they discovered was that the condition seemed to afflict all seniors who lived long enough, not just a few unlucky souls, as previously assumed. It appeared the disease was afflicting all seniors who lived a long life. This is when the disease became finally recognized as a real medical concern and was labeled Alzheimer's disease. Following that, an epidemic was declared, as it was recognized the memory loss that grandma and grandpa were experiencing was not a product of their age, but was due to a disease ravaging their brains. There seemed to be no way to prevent, reverse, or cure the disease. Furthermore, it was at this time that they realized Alzheimer's was not a normal part of aging. Rather, it was a disease and as such needed to be treated and cured. But as you will see later, a cure has been very difficult to find. Today, the disease is no longer dismissed as a malady that affects only a few unfortunate souls, or a byproduct of aging. Today, it has made its way onto the center stage and has gained massive notoriety as one of the world's nastiest killers. In the next section, we will clarify a point of confusion for many people. Many people think dementia and Alzheimer's are the same thing, but as you will see, they are not. Welcome back. So in this section, I want to briefly talk about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. If you are like me, before I ever started learning about dementia and Alzheimer's, I used to think that they were pretty much the same thing, but I was wrong. Firstly, dementia is not Alzheimer's disease, but Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. This is an important distinction to be clear about. Dementia actually means out of one's mind, or deprived of mind. Usually dementia is an umbrella term, which describes a number of symptoms such as poor memory or the inability to form new memories. Dementia is caused by some sort of brain damage. There are several types of dementias, which include vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, mixed dementia, Parkinson's disease, frontotemporal dementia, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, normal pressure hydrocephalus, Huntington's disease, and Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia though, accounting for 60 to 80% of all cases. It is a neurodegenerative disease because it attacks and destroys the neurons in the brain, particularly in the cortex, where your memories are stored. Okay, so I hope this section has helped you to clarify the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. In the next section, I want to briefly address the argument that Alzheimer's is not actually a real disease and is simply a consequence of aging. So in this section, I want to address an issue which, when you think about it, probably is something you wouldn't have thought about unless somebody explicitly addressed it with you. That issue is whether Alzheimer's is a real disease. Now, not everyone actually believes Alzheimer's is a real disease. For instance, Dr. Peter Whitehouse, MD and author of the book The Myth of Alzheimer's, has an interesting take on the topic. In his book, he explores the role of educational institutions and the medical professionals, political establishments, and pharmaceutical companies, and their role in perpetuating the belief that Alzheimer's is a real disease and can be cured. As you can imagine, there is a massive reward, financial, prestige, fame, to the person or people or organizations that discover such a cure. However, there are many researchers and scientists who disagree that Alzheimer's is a real disease, but rather that it's a consequence of aging and thus can't be cured because aging can't be cured. Rather than looking for the proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we should be looking at ways to prevent Alzheimer's occurring in the first place. But as long as we continue to believe Alzheimer's is a disease, enormous amounts of money will be spent to find the cure. Personally, I don't want to actually get too involved in that debate, but rather I want to find ways to improve life right now rather than worrying about if Alzheimer's is a disease or not. I believe that this is an important issue to be clear about though in your own mind. For one, if you believe that Alzheimer's is a disease, then you might place your hope that there is a cure in the making, a solution being procured from the cauldrons deep down in some specialized laboratory by genius scientists, hard at work finding a miracle drug to keep our minds intact. Yet the truth might be that a cure to cure Alzheimer's is to cure aging. And as aging is not a disease, this seems like an unlikely prospect for us now or ever. But if Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging, then the situation may seem very bleak for many people. No cure is in the making, just the inevitable prospect of slowly descending into darkness and the struggle and strife that our families will experience as a result. But maybe there is another option, one that prevents the disease from ever showing up in the first place. Maybe we can take a decade's worth of research and use it to build a preventative strategy to ward off Alzheimer's altogether. Personally, I believe that this is probably our best approach right now. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this section. I've included a short quiz for you to help solidify what you have learned thus far. So after you've given that quiz a go, then I'll see you in the next section. Welcome back. So in this section, I want to briefly explore the global prevalence of the disease, which as you will see is quite shocking. According to Alzheimer's Disease International, in 2018, a new person is diagnosed with Alzheimer's every 3 seconds. Currently, there are over 50 million people with Alzheimer's worldwide, and the rates are doubling every 20 years. By 2030, it is expected that there will be 75 million people with Alzheimer's worldwide. I live in New Zealand. Our entire population is less than 4.5 million. So the number of people currently suffering with Alzheimer's disease on Earth is more than 10 times our population. The global prevalence of the disease is truly massive, and it is taking the world by storm. It is very quickly becoming one of the biggest threats to life. To illustrate, let's consider the leading causes of death in the world today. Would it surprise you that Alzheimer's disease is in the top 10 causes of death in most countries? In developed countries, it is surprisingly in the top 3 or even top 2 leading causes of death. In Figure 1, which is the top causes of death in New Zealand, Alzheimer's has crept into second place, just behind ischemic heart disease. And this appears to be the global trend for high-income countries. Looking at the leading causes of death across the globe, the World Health Organization divides this metric by countries' wealth. They have 4 categories, which range from low-income to high-income countries. Figure 2 displays the results for high-income countries. As you can see from these 2015 statistics, Alzheimer's is the third leading cause of death, following heart disease and stroke as the top causes. The problem is also expected to worsen in the next decade. The reason is that many baby boomers still living today will soon be reaching their 80s, a time when their potential for developing Alzheimer's increases to 50%. For example, in the United States, during the baby boomer years 1946 to 1964, around 76 million babies were born. An estimated 11 million have already died. But through immigration, that number of baby boomers still living is still estimated at 76 million. This means that baby boomers will be reaching their 80s between 2026 and 2044. In just a few years' time, we may begin to see an acceleration of new cases of Alzheimer's in America and across the globe. And the cost of caring for this colossal number of people is staggering, as we will see in the next video. Welcome back. In this video, we are going to take a look at the financial cost that Alzheimer's disease exacts on the global economy. It is not hard to imagine that the cost of care for such a large number of people with Alzheimer's is staggering. Actually, in 2015, cost to treat dementia was approximately $818 billion, which was around 1% of global GDP. These costs are for the care and medical treatment of people with dementia. Of course, a huge percentage of that cost will be attributed to Alzheimer's because it's the leading cause of dementia. To put cost into perspective, in 2017, the entire GDP of New Zealand was $186 billion. So you can see the global cost of treating dementia dwarfs our entire economy. In 2018, the cost of treating dementia worldwide is expected to rise to $1 trillion. From an economic standpoint, dementia is a serious global problem. In fact, if dementia care were a country, it would be the 18th biggest economy in the world, with turnover exceeding that of Apple and Google. As the world has woken up to the massive problem dementia is creating, more and more resources have been allocated to find a cure. But a cure has been elusive, which we will examine further in the next video. Okay, welcome back. So what exactly is Alzheimer's disease? As you will see in this section, the word exactly might be a bit of a misnomer, as trying to define the root cause of Alzheimer's has been the bugbear of researchers for decades. Billions have been invested in drug therapies which have all failed. Well over 50,000 research papers published on the disease, and hundreds, if not thousands, of research labs across the world in the best universities, all looking for a cure, but yet none has been found. Several theories exist on what causes the disease, and it's not difficult to understand why it's so difficult to pinpoint the problem. The brain is the most complex, yet marvelous organ in the known universe, and the components under investigation are so tiny that it requires incredibly powerful microscopes to see just a glimpse of what's going on. And the brain's environment is also very unpredictable. There are a myriad of variables which appear to play a role in the development of the disease. Variables like diet, exercise, and education, just to name a few. Hence, it is difficult for researchers to pinpoint the exact cause, because there may actually be many causes and not just one. In fact, according to Dr. David Snowden, who did groundbreaking research on Alzheimer's and aging in the famous NUN study out of the University of Minnesota, he estimated that dementia, of which Alzheimer's, as you know, is a primary disease, has at least 60 known causes. These causes could be an infection from a bacterium, as in an untreated syphilis, a virus such as AIDS, nutritional or metabolic disorders such as vitamin B12 deficiency and hypothyroidism, drug side effects, toxins, tumors, strokes, serious head trauma. The disease also reacts differently in most people. For some, symptoms become evident rapidly, while in others they are slow to emerge. However, according to Dr. Snowden, what is common in Alzheimer's patients is that there's a slow downward course of mental, physical, and social deterioration. To make matters worse, though, it appears that the presence of the markers of the disease does not always necessitate the appearance of symptoms of the disease in a person's day-to-day life. This is seen in many people who, after autopsy, show all the signs of extensive brain damage with Alzheimer's riddling their brains, yet they themselves seem to be living right up to the day they died without any apparent symptoms or problems. So defining exactly what Alzheimer's is, as you can see, is not an easy task. However, at the most basic level, the presence of Alzheimer's always seems to occur in the company of two major players, which Aloysius Alzheimer discovered in 1906. These are plaques and tangles. Much attention has been paid to these two players, so let us consider what their game plan might be in causing the disease. In fact, these two players are so popular amongst researchers that they have formed two distinct groups of supporters, the Baptists and the Taoists. Each group holds firmly to the belief that Alzheimer's is caused by either the beta-amyloid protein, BAP, or the tau proteins. Their research focus is thus heavily geared to finding a cure to one of these causes. Funding is also heavily predicated on each group's ability to persuade funders on the virtues of their research direction and the potential of a cure. Currently, Baptists hold the high ground and dominate funding. Hence, in my discussion, I will start the explanation from the beta-amyloid perspective. However, please keep in mind that this is just one theory, and which may in fact be the cause of Alzheimer's, though unlikely. The truth is that it may not even be in the ballpark. There are so many other possibilities, which we won't even cover here. And even the Taoists, they may actually be closer to the truth at the end of the day. But then again, they may also be completely off track. Unfortunately, the current state of unraveling the cause of Alzheimer's, to borrow the words of Winston Churchill, is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside of an enigma. But perhaps there is a key. So without getting too technical, let us consider the first of these two major players, beta-amyloid. Beta-amyloid is a sticky plaque which seems to hang around the synapses of neurons and blocks communication between them. These plaques can also cause inflammation, which leads to an immune system response, which can then lead up to damaging surrounding tissues. It is also believed that the presence of beta-amyloid plaque at the synapses causes the appearance of the second major player, tau tangles. These tangles are made up of tau proteins inside the neuron. Tau proteins hold microtubules together. Microtubules are like little roadways inside the cell, which enable micronutrients to be shipped back and forth. Without them, the cell would die. Presumably, beta-amyloid plaques cause a process which results in these tau proteins breaking away and resulting in the disintegration of the microtubules. The end result is that eventually the cell shrivels up and dies, causing what is known as a neurofibrillary tangle. This process goes on repeatedly, destroying neurons one by one until your brain eventually can no longer function. So this is the basics of what is believed to be behind the disease from one perspective. There's a lot more to it, but for now I've just provided you with a basic explanation. In the next section, I will describe a system which two German scientists devised to determine the level of spread of the disease using 6 stages. In 1991, German Heiko and Eva Brack published a study which showed how the location of tangles enabled them to define 6 clear stages of the disease. In stages 0, there was either no tangles or they were extremely scarce, while in the subsequent stages 1 to 6, there was a progression of the disease as it increased and spread itself throughout key thinking areas of the brain. In the course of their investigations, they autopsied more than 800 brains and discovered that tangles appeared in people as young as 20 years old. They didn't have brains younger than 20, but they believed that Alzheimer's disease was most likely developing even in adolescence. They estimated that Alzheimer's may take up to 50 years to progress from stages 1 to stages 5 or 6, the most severe stages. From their findings and that of other researchers since then, tangles first appear in the entorhinal cortex, the region important for memory, situated near the base of the skull. From there, it moves into the hippocampus and neighboring tissues. The hippocampus has a seahorse shape and is critical to learning and memory. Finally, the tangles reach the upper layers of the brain, the neocortex. This is the brain's executive. It does many important things like interpreting and expressing language and making sense of our sensory information. As the tangles spread from the entorhinal cortex, stages 1 and 2, to the hippocampus, stages 3 and 4, and then to the neocortex, stages 5 and 6, there is an apparent parallel, at least in part, with the general pattern of progression of loss of mental, physical, and social functioning which occurs in Alzheimer's sufferers. Usually, it is expected symptoms of Alzheimer's will appear in stages 5 and 6, but brains autopsied from people diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia have showed that symptoms can appear as early as stage 2. This, of course, is just a rough sketch of the massively complex picture of how our brains operate. As learning occurs and memory is stored, usually the brain works in a parallel processing method across the entorhinal cortex, hippocampus, and the neocortex. It's also believed that the brain devotes most of its resources to communicating amongst its own brain cells, as if it is constantly talking to itself. Alzheimer's increasingly shuts down this critical crosstalk that makes us who we are. Okay, so well done on completing this section. It was a fair bit more technical, so I hope you were able to retain some of that. To help you solidify your learning, I have a short quiz for you to take. After that, we'll proceed onto the section which deals with making a diagnosis, risk factors, and disease progression. Welcome back. So how do you know if you have Alzheimer's? The issue of diagnosing the disease is not as simple as we might hope. The most conclusive way to tell if you had the disease was via a brain biopsy. This is done post-mortem, which is the usual way. Once a person has died, they take a small bit of brain tissue and examine it under a microscope, looking for the telltale signs of the disease. If they find the telltale signs of plaques and tangles, and the person also exhibited symptoms of Alzheimer's, then usually they are confident that the individual had Alzheimer's. One of the primary symptoms of Alzheimer's is the inability to form new memories. So maybe you might conclude then that if you can't form new memories that you have Alzheimer's. But this is not the case, as there are plenty of other reasons which can interfere with the formation of new memories. For instance, prescription or over-the-counter medications can be the culprit. Certain antidepressants, antihistamines, anti-anxiety medications, muscle relaxants, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and pain medications given after surgery can be the problem. Depression can cause loss of memory. Depression causes loss of focus and attention, for instance. Stress and anxiety can lead to being distracted and overstimulated. This can make it harder to store and recall new information. Excessive alcohol consumption can cause memory loss. So can tobacco and drug use. Smoking actually reduces oxygen in the brain, which can interfere with the brain functioning. Lack of sleep is another problem. Too little sleep can cause fatigue and interfere with the brain's ability to consolidate and retrieve information. Pure nutrition is another factor. Your brain runs on high-quality fats and proteins. Vitamin B1 and B12 are necessary for good brain function. To get these vital nutrients, you need to eat healthily. Other possible causes for memory loss also include infections such as HIV, tuberculosis, and syphilis, which all affect the brain. An underactive or overactive thyroid gland can also be the problem. Head injuries are also a prime cause of memory loss. People who play high-contact sports or motor vehicle injuries are prone to memory loss. So memory loss on its own is certainly no clear indication that you have the disease. A clinician will normally rule out the above causes first, before proceeding to consider other causes. Usually for a diagnosis of Alzheimer's to be made, an individual will show evidence of these three symptoms: impairments in short-term memory, impairments in another area of cognition, such as language, impairments in social or daily functioning, for instance dressing oneself or washing. If an individual shows impairments in all three of the above, then they are probably heading for a more formal diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So what's involved in actually getting a diagnosis? Usually, a proper diagnosis will require several tests. This will usually involve all of the following: doing a thorough medical history, doing tests which assess your mental status and mood, doing a physical and neurological exam, doing other tests such as blood tests and brain imaging to rule out other types of causes of dementia like the ones I mentioned. These tests are usually conducted by a specialist who has extensive expertise in diagnosing Alzheimer's disease. They may include neurologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists. So as you can see, it is not cut and dry trying to determine if someone has Alzheimer's disease. And finding a specialist who can correctly diagnose a problem may be a very difficult ask, depending on where you live in the world. So welcome back. So in this section, we are going to take a look at the symptoms of the disease and consider when it is appropriate to seek professional testing and advice. So let me ask you this. How often have you forgotten where you put your keys, or your wallet, or the name of the person you just met? This happens to me sometimes. Nowadays, I hang the keys in the same place when I arrive home. I also use mnemonic techniques to help me remember people's names. But none of these examples are an indication that you have Alzheimer's. These are more a problem of attention. Usually you don't pay much attention to where you lay your keys or your wallet. You don't attend to the person's name when they give it to you, so you don't save it in long-term memory. Hence, there is nothing actually to remember, so you actually haven't forgotten anything. Maybe that has put a smile on your face. And now you can rest easy because those memory blips that you may have been experiencing are not an indication of Alzheimer's. In fact, it takes 7 seconds of attention to lay down a new memory trace. There is a section in your brain called the hippocampus, which is believed to be involved in creating new memories. The hippocampus is responsible for transferring short-term memory to long-term memory. But to do this, you need to concentrate on the information for at least 7 seconds. Now, if you do concentrate on the information for 7 seconds or longer, and then you discover that you can't remember anything at all, then possibly something is interfering with your hippocampus's ability to create new long-term memories. But this still doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's. There are plenty of other reasons for the brain's inability to form new memories. I've covered these in the previous section, but here are a few again to jog your memory. Prescription medications, depression, anxiety, lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and head injuries can all interfere with the formation of new memories. So consider those causes first before you get too concerned. And then if you think that there is still something concerning about your memory loss, seek out a professional who can conduct a thorough diagnosis, preferably someone who specializes in dementia. In fact, sometimes 2 opinions is better than 1. A second opinion might provide a different or more optimistic perspective. Now here is where Alzheimer's might be the problem. When you don't know what keys are used for, or that you have a car, or what you put in a wallet. You don't know the person's name because you can't recognize them, even though they are your closest family and friends. If this is happening to you or someone you know, then get help, because the earlier you intervene, the better your chances are of slowing down the progression of the disease. In the next section, I'm going to describe the possible progression of the disease. Of course, it varies from one person to another, but let's take a look at what happens from the initial stages when symptoms first begin to show up until the last stage, which ends the person's life. Welcome back. So in this section, we'll briefly take a walk down the path of development, from first signs of the disease to the end of the road. I'm going to present you with information in a general context though. as if the progression is linear, going from one stage to another in a systematic order. This may be true for some people, but it will vary considerably across the population as a whole. Some people may skip entire stages or jump between stages. There is no guarantee that progression will proceed the way I am presenting it here, so please take this as just a general description. In the first stages of the disease, you will notice that you struggle to store new memories. This is called anterograde amnesia. The reason is that over time, several decades in fact, the disease chips away at your hippocampus, eventually destroying its ability to write new memories to your long-term memory, which is stored in the cortex. So you might start realizing that you can't recall if you had breakfast or what you did a few days before. The memories are simply not there. There just seems to be a big black hole. A person at this stage will continue to make the same requests or tell the same story over and over again because they can't remember that what just happened a few minutes ago. After that, the disease begins to spread to other areas of the brain. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads to the region of the brain which processes language. It gets harder and harder to find the right words. You mix up words. You can't recall previous words you always used to use. You have to devise simpler ways to say things because the vocabulary just is gone. Then it moves on to the front of the brain which deals with reasoning. Slowly the person loses the ability to solve problems, understand new concepts, and make plans. From there it invades the brain regions which regulate emotions. This may cause sudden uncontrollable mood swings. You could start noticing personality changes. You might see sudden outbursts of aggression and intolerance. Other symptoms could include depression, fidgetiness, anxiousness. Next, it moves to the regions which control sensory input. This is where we make sense of what we see, hear, and smell and touch. It can spark hallucinations and delusions at this point. You might get lost going to the mailbox, for instance, or wander aimlessly a long way from your home. Eventually, the disease causes a person's oldest and most precious memories to go. They are stored in the back of the brain. You can't recognize friends or family. You forget places, things, and dates. The most precious people in your life disappear. Near the end, the disease will compromise a person's balance, coordination, and then in the very final stages, it destroys the part of the brain which regulates breathing and the heart. The body shuts down and the person dies. The process is usually slow and can take several years. It gradually robs a person of their dignity, personality, and relationships. There is no cure for Alzheimer's at this stage, and there may never be. But there might be a way of slowing the progress or even ridding it completely from your brain altogether. The success of this will, of course, hinge on the progression of the disease and how much intentional action you take to reverse or slow its progress. It may require some serious hard work and major lifestyle changes to be successful. Okay, so now that you have looked at the progression, let's consider some of the risk factors. And the question many people might be asking themselves, will I get, or someone I love, get Alzheimer's? Welcome back. In this section, I want to discuss a very important question you might be asking yourself. Will I get Alzheimer's? This is not an easy question to answer, as it seems that there are a myriad of variables to take into consideration. First of all, Alzheimer's is a disease of aging, so age is the number one risk factor. If you get old enough, your chances greatly increase that you will get the disease. But here is another important point. Most people think that they get the disease as a standalone event, like catching a cold, that it just happens one day out of the blue. This is wrong. The disease starts building decades before you ever become aware of it. It surreptitiously grows in your brain for years, doing untold damage, until it reaches a tipping point, at which stage you begin to notice your memory slipping in unusual and troubling ways. Age becomes a primary risk factor only because you need to get old enough first before you notice the symptoms of the disease. Usually you don't notice your memory slipping before the age of 65, and on average about 3 out of every 100 people between 65 and 75 start experiencing symptoms. After that, your chances of Alzheimer's symptoms doubles every 5 years. On average, about 20 out of every 100 people between 75 and 85 develop symptoms. But remember that they already had the disease for decades and only start noticing the symptoms at this age. Furthermore, your genes can further predispose you to getting the disease. When someone starts suffering from dementia before the age of 60, it is usually a result of a genetic mutation. This is also known as early onset dementia and is strongly inherited, but cases are rare. For most people, 95% and above, the age of onset will be over 60 years of age. This is known as late onset dementia. Then there are people who have the APOE4 gene. For them, developing dementia is slightly higher. But even with this genetic disposition, you may be fine. There are millions of people without the APOE4 gene who go on to develop symptoms. Hence, genetics alone is no guarantee either way. By the time people start reaching 85 and over, their chances of developing symptoms skyrocket to almost 1 out of every 2 people. Today, your chances are extremely good that you will live beyond 85. Hence, you have a 50% chance of experiencing symptoms of Alzheimer's. Currently, in the most developed countries of the world, life expectancy is now in the high 80s due to medical advancements. That number will most likely keep increasing over the next few decades until most people will potentially start reaching over 100 years of age. Some people believe that within the next century or so, we will most likely start seeing the average age increase to at least 125 years of age, assuming that the current rate of medical progress and lifestyle improvements continue. It's my personal opinion is that people need to take a long-term view of their health and life expectancy, with the probability that they will live for at least a century. And as we currently have no cure for Alzheimer's, prevention is your best course of defense. And finally, looking at gender differences, we note that females are more prone to getting Alzheimer's than males, even when we take into account that females live slightly longer than men on average. In the USA, 2/3 of Alzheimer's cases are female. A similar trend can be seen in other developed countries too. To explain this gender difference, some have suggested that it is linked to the decrease in the hormone estrogen after menopause. However, in controlled trials, which have administered hormone replacement therapy in females, no reduction in developing Alzheimer's was shown. So for now, we don't really know why females develop Alzheimer's more than males. So let's go back to our original question. How likely are you to get Alzheimer's? The truth is that it probably depends on an interaction between your genes, lifestyle choices, and your environment. Your likelihood also increases if you are a female and you live long enough. If you live in a developed country, your chances of living a long life are very favorable. But the good news is that depending on your lifestyle choices right now, your chances of experiencing the symptoms of Alzheimer's are largely under your control. Getting Alzheimer's is not inevitable. Research has shown us as much. You can protect yourself from it to a very large extent. So that brings us to the end of this section. Once again, I have a short quiz for you to help you solidify the information. Welcome back. Over the past few decades, thousands of studies have been conducted and many medications tested to find a cure for Alzheimer's, but still very little progress has been made to find a cure. Currently, there is no magic pill to wipe out the problem. So what can we do to protect ourselves from Alzheimer's? This is another difficult question to answer, because when symptoms eventually begin to emerge, it is usually after decades of silent, slow progression, as the disease slowly builds up in the brain. Most researchers agree that the disease is not the result of a sudden catastrophe of the brain, but rather it's a continuum of development spanning decades. Hence, symptoms can go on undetected for many years, until people begin to notice their memory slipping. But now, it will be at the point when the disease is already well rooted in the brain. This is what we refer to as the tipping point. The point when the disease has spread so far and wide that you begin to experience its effects. Now, this doesn't mean that you are helpless and that you have no way of fighting back. On the contrary, some people take massive action and recover their mental health, going on to live symptom-free for the rest of their lives, or for many extra years. For others, though, the road is not as optimistic. For them, the progression may be too far gone to make any meaningful difference. But the good news is that you don't have to wait around to make changes to your future. The way you live now appears to make the biggest difference on whether you will get dementia in your later years or not. But the real problem is that we all have a tendency to devalue rewards we may receive in the future. There have been many studies which have demonstrated this. People take little action now to get a reward way down the line. Psychologists call this delayed gratification. What researchers have found is that we don't like to delay gratification to a later date. If I offered you $10 today or $50 5 years from now, which would you take? Most people would take the $10 now, even though $50 is 5 times more. 5 years just seems too long to wait. But if I change the timeline to $10 now or $50 just 1 week from now, which would you take then? Would you change your mind? Most people would. But in a sense, this is exactly the kind of problem we have with preventing Alzheimer's. We have to forego those unhealthy, maybe more pleasurable health choices that we have now for healthier ones of tomorrow. Depending on how old you are today, tomorrow might actually be a long way away, 30, 40, 50 years or so. So exchanging that plate of fatty fast food now for a plate of vegetables, or exchanging that hour of TV for a 5-kilometer run, may not seem so rewarding when you have to wait so long to receive that reward way down the track. So maybe this is why so many people would rather put their hope in a cure rather than turn their lifestyles upside down, because it's just easier sometimes to do nothing. And then, of course, there are no guarantees. You could follow the best diet, exercise regularly, control diabetes, cholesterol and blood pressure, take all your vitamins, manage stress, be involved in groups, hang out with family and friends, have an active spiritual life, read regularly, meditate, and play a musical instrument, all good for Alzheimer's prevention, but still get the disease. But research now shows that your chances are radically improved that you won't, or at least you'll build up a massive resistance against the disease, so that you'll remain Alzheimer's free for the rest of your life, with some other ailment ending your life before Alzheimer's ever has a chance of raising its ugly head. In fact, this is potentially the cure, according to Gary Small and Gigi Vaughan, authors of the book How to Prevent Alzheimer's. They believe that every person on the planet may in fact be destined to get dementia at one point or another. It may just be a matter of time, but the solution is to put onset out so far that some other ailment will kill you before dementia ever can. So if you, for instance, are going to die at age 90, you push the onset out to 95. Or if you're going to die at, say, age 114, you push it out to 120. But of course, we don't know how long we're going to live for. So the solution is that you need to live in a way that assumes you're going to grow very old. My advice is to play the long game. If your goal is to live with good health and vitality to, say, 100 or more, then you'll be more eager to invest into yourself right now. Of course, you'll thank yourself later for your efforts today. And I can practically guarantee that you'll also feel so much better right now too. So, how do you go about preventing Alzheimer's and dementia then? Many experts in the field agree that you invest in a more holistic preventative strategy which encompasses several areas of your life. Each of these areas has been thoroughly researched, and findings suggest that there are protective factors from each one of these, to one degree or another, in the prevention of brain degeneration diseases like Alzheimer's. These areas that I'm talking about are nutrition, physical exercise, mental development, stress management, social connectedness, and spiritual well-being. I call these the 6 pillars of health. Each one of these areas has been extensively studied and researched, which is why I don't really have time to go into them at length now. But I mention them here so that you can explore each one by yourself further. Okay, so that's it for this section. In the final video, I'm going to wrap things up and tell you what you can do next, assuming that you want to build your own personal preventative health strategy. Well done on reaching the end of this course. I hope that this course has given you a more insightful and better understanding of Alzheimer's disease. I know it certainly did for me, and I have also made several improvements to my day-to-day lifestyle as a result. And as I learn more, so I gradually implement more strategies into my life. As they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. When it comes to Alzheimer's and many other diseases, prevention is better than cure. But prevention is also a lifelong process that doesn't happen overnight. A good personal health program should be sustainable and continuous. You should be able to follow it every day of your life, and it should enhance your life now and every day moving forward into the future. As you may have noticed, I have not really covered prevention much in this course, and there is good reason for that. There is a mountain of information to get through. What I did though was give you the 6 pillars that I believe you should focus on in building a preventative strategy. Here are those 6 pillars again: physical exercise, nutrition, mental development, social connectedness, stress management, and spirituality. Now, when you review the research on these pillars of good health, you notice that each one contributes a certain amount of protection against Alzheimer's disease. Each one can protect you to a certain level, but no one pillar can offer you complete protection on its own. Therefore, just focusing on one is not enough. You need to address all of them daily. You can't just do a 5-kilometer run every day and think everything is going to be rosy. Yes, the 5-kilometer run will help you, but on its own, it will most likely be insufficient. A good preventative strategy encompasses all the pillars, but I confess that it is easier said than done. For one, you need to decide what to include in your health strategy. For instance, what nutrition will you include in your diet? What exercise is good for you at your age and stage? How will you reduce stress? And what sorts of mental exercises are good for the brain? You'll also need self-motivation to devise a plan and stick to it. A good preventative strategy encompasses all of these factors. On their own, they have limited power, but together they are able to protect you in a multitude of ways. I encourage you today to find ways to incorporate these pillars into your health and make them a key part of your preventative strategy against diseases like Alzheimer's. Okay, so that's it from me for now. I hope you have enjoyed this course so far, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you in the future. I hope that this material will help to improve your overall health and build a more effective prevention strategy against Alzheimer's disease. And once again, thank you for joining me on this journey to living a long life with health, vitality, and happiness.